You're looking at your paycheck, and the number is fine. It's okay. But there's that little voice, that quiet whisper in the back of your mind.
See, that's a thought that almost everyone has at some point. And it's not about being greedy. It's about fairness. It's about recognition. It's about your actual value. But that one simple thought, it usually leads to a couple of really tough feelings. Maybe you look around the office. You see the projects. You know exactly who's doing what. You might even have a good idea of what other people are making. And that's when that nagging feeling starts to creep in. That feeling that the scales just aren't balanced. And honestly, that can be one of the most demoralizing feelings in your entire career.
And if you do, believe me, you are not alone. Just the idea of having that conversation, it can feel confrontational. It can feel deeply personal and just uncomfortable. We're taught to be grateful, to just be happy we have a job, so we stay quiet.
So let's reframe this whole thing. Look, I've spent more than 2 decades in the corporate world, and I've sat on both sides of that very table. I've been the one making my case, heart-pounding, and I've been the leader on the other side, listening. I know exactly what works, and I've seen what absolutely spectacularly fails.
So if you feel underpaid, I want you to listen closely. What we're about to go through isn't just another checklist of negotiation tactics. This is about a fundamental shift in your perspective. A new way of seeing things that can change not just your next salary conversation, but how you understand your professional value for the rest of your career.
The single biggest mistake I see people make is treating this like a personal plea. It's not. The real goal here is to move away from asking for something and move toward presenting a logical, fact-based business argument. Think about it like this. The old way is all about emotion. You feel like you should earn more. You hope they'll agree. You ask them for a favor. But here's the truth. Leaders, the people who make these decisions, they don't operate on feelings. They operate on facts, on data, on business cases. So the professional way changes the entire dynamic. You're no longer asking, you're presenting. It's not personal anymore. It's just business.
Let that one sink in for a moment. Every single day that you work for less than what your skills are worth on the open market, you are effectively offering your employer a discount. It's time to end that sale.
So, how do we actually build this business case? This isn't about just walking in with your feelings. It's about doing your homework. It's all in the preparation. This is where the negotiation is won or lost, long before you ever step foot in that room. Your case is going to stand on 3 strong pillars. First, objective data about what your role is actually worth. Second, concrete proof of your excellent performance. And third, and this is key, translating all of that performance into the language that the business understands best, numbers. Pillar 1 is your market data. This is how you take your personal opinion completely out of the equation. You use sites like Glassdoor and Levels.fyi to get a realistic salary range for your specific role, your experience, and your city. Talk to recruiters. It's literally their job to know what companies are paying. You can even check in with trusted people in your network. Your goal is to build an objective, undeniable, data-backed foundation. Okay, next, you become an evidence collector. You should be constantly saving every piece of positive feedback. That email from a client who was thrilled with your work, save it. The weekly report showing you crushed your KPIs, save it. A quick note from your manager saying, "Great job," you save that too. This becomes your brag file, your internal proof that you consistently deliver value. Now, just listing your wins isn't quite enough. You have to translate them. So, you didn't just improve a process. No, you improved a process that saved the team 10 hours of work every single week. You didn't just lead a successful project. You led a project that directly increased revenue by 15%. See? You're connecting your actions directly to the company's bottom line.
All right, you've done the work, you've got the market data, you've got your evidence file, and you've quantified your impact. Now it all comes down to the delivery, because a perfect case presented poorly will almost always fail.
When the time comes to actually talk about numbers, you need to go first. State a specific number that's at the top end of the market range you researched. This is a technique called anchoring. It sets the frame for the entire negotiation. From that point on, every other number is discussed in relation to that initial anchor you set. And your wording here is critical. You are not asking for permission, you're presenting your findings. So, instead of saying, I was hoping I could maybe get a raise to X, you say, based on my research into the market value for this role and my contributions like A, B, and C, compensation in the range of X is what's appropriate. Feel the difference? One's a weak request, the other is a strong conclusion based on evidence. After you've made your case and you've stated your number, you have to do the hardest thing in the world. Stop,
talking. Just pause. Let the silence hang there for a second. It shows confidence. It communicates that you've presented a complete, well-thought-out argument, and you're now waiting for a professional response. Don't rush to fill that silence.
And through this entire process, you have to remember that mindset shift. If they say no, or if they counter with a low number, do not take it personally. It is not a judgment on you as a person. It is a business negotiation, that's it. Your job is to stay calm, stay objective, and keep bringing the conversation back to the facts and the data you brought with you.
You know, this whole thing really just boils down to answering one question. Not what your company feels like paying you, but what the market says your skills and your contributions are actually worth. When you truly know that number and you've got the data to prove it, you're no longer asking for a favor. You're simply making a business case for fair market value. So I'll leave you with that to think about. What is your value truly worth?
You know, I want to tell you a story. It's about one of the most dedicated people I ever had on my team. And her story, well, it's really about a silent mistake that I see countless professionals make, one that cost them dearly over the course of a career. For 5 solid years, she did everything by the book. She always hit her deadlines, her work was just excellent, and she was incredibly loyal. She just kept her head down, did the work, and truly believed that her effort alone would get noticed and rewarded. In all that time, not once, not a single time, did she bring up the topic of her pay. Then, we brought someone new onto the team, a new hire, in a very similar role. This person was bright, very capable, but had, significantly less experience. And then one day, just in a casual chat, a number got mentioned, a salary number. It was the new hire's salary. And just like that, in an instant, 5 years of quiet, heads-down dedication turned into 5 years of deep regret. The new person was making a whole lot more than she was, and the feeling, it wasn't even anger at the company or at the new hire. It was this deep, personal sense of shock, the feeling of being completely and utterly overlooked. Does any of that story sound familiar? I'm willing to bet it does. It's this quiet tragedy that plays out in offices all over the world, and it's almost always rooted in a set of unspoken internal barriers. So let's break down these 4 psychological walls that keep so many talented people from being paid what they're worth. So the first one is just a plain fear of rejection. And look, it's not just about hearing the word no. It's the fear of being seen as difficult, of being labeled as demanding, or maybe not a team player. I've seen it over and over again. We stay silent because silence just feels safer than a conversation that might get uncomfortable. The second barrier is, well, it's a feeling of gratitude. You know the one, I'm just so grateful to have this job. And while being grateful is a wonderful quality, it can become a kind of trap. It can actually suppress the belief that you deserve more than just having a job. It convinces you that you shouldn't ask for what you've truly earned. And then, of course, there's that internal critic, that little voice in your head that whispers, Am I really worth more? What have I actually done to deserve it? That self-doubt is just paralyzing. It stops you from even thinking about how to build a case for your own value. And finally, there's what I call market blindness. This is the danger of simply not knowing your worth out there in the current marketplace. If you don't know the going rate for your skills and your level of experience, you're basically negotiating in the dark. You've got no anchor, no data, just a hope that you're being treated fairly. And all of this brings us to the most important point. Your silence is your biggest enemy. In my experience, the main reason people stay underpaid isn't because a manager told them no. It's because the manager was never even asked in the first place.
Okay, now I'm going to pull back the curtain a little bit on how these decisions are really made inside a company. This is the part of the process that most employees never get to see, and honestly, understanding it completely changes the game.
So let me just ask you a question. What if, by the time you walk into your annual performance review, the decision about your raise has already been made? Right. Here's the hidden timeline that most people miss. Companies, they operate on these very strict budgeting cycles. The actual pool of money available for raises, that isn't decided during your review. It's often locked in months beforehand. What that means is your manager walks into that meeting with you with a budget that's already set. A lot of the time, their hands are already tied. So this really shows you the 2 paths you can take. The first is the path to stagnation. That's where you wait for the annual review and you end up reacting to a budget that's already set in stone. The second, that's the path to growth. It's proactive. It's about having conversations about your value and your career goals early and often. You're not trying to change this year's budget anymore. You are strategically influeing the budget for next year.
So let's end where we started. That story about my former employee, it wasn't really about an unfair company. It was about the devastating cost of silence. So the question for you isn't really, do you deserve more? The real question is, what is your silence costing you?
Let me paint a picture for you. It's the end of the year. You've just finished what was, honestly, a career-defining year. Every single target wasn't just met, you completely shattered it. That big, scary project everyone was worried about, yeah, you got it done. Ahead of schedule, under budget. You put in the hours, the late nights, the weekends. You feel it in your bones that you've done exceptional work, and you deserve to be rewarded for it. But then, the compensation review happens. And you come face to face with something I've seen time and time again, what I call the performer's paradox. It's that jarring disconnect between the value you created and what the company's spreadsheet says you're worth. I want you to really think about a time like that. A time when you went above and beyond on every single thing that was asked of you. You were the one who solved the tough problems. You were the one mentoring the new hires. You were the one they could always count on. By any objective measure, you were a star performer. So when your manager slides that piece of paper across the desk and you see a 3% raise, maybe 4 if you're really lucky, it doesn't just feel disappointing, it feels confusing. It almost feels like an insult. And you can't help but ask yourself, did they not see everything I did? Do they not value me? And right there, that's the moment the disillusionment begins to creep in. Now, to really understand what's happening, you have to step back from the emotion of it all and take a look inside what I call the compensation machine. What I'm going to show you isn't in any employee handbook. It's the hidden architecture, the real mechanics of how these decisions are made, and it all starts long before you ever sit down for that review. All right, let's get into it. The very first rule you have to understand is the budget cycle. The total pot of money available for raises, that was probably decided 6, maybe even 9 months ago. It was based on the company's financial forecast for the year. So that amazing work you did last quarter, your incredible finish to the year, well, by the time that happened, the pie was already baked. Your manager isn't deciding how big the pie is. They're just deciding how to slice up the one they were given. And this is so important. Companies spend a ton of time and money on what they call market benchmarking. Your HR department has data, lots of it, that tells them the going rate for a project manager or a senior analyst in your specific city. So the whole system, it's designed to pay for the role and to stay competitive in the market. It's not really designed to reward the unique individual brilliance that you brought to that role. And that leads right into the next major constraint, internal parity. You see, a company has to maintain a sense of fairness. They simply can't give you a massive 20% raise if your teammates, doing very similar jobs, are only getting 4%. It just creates all sorts of downstream problems with morale and salary compression. So even if your manager thinks you're the best thing since sliced bread, their hands are often tied by this need to keep things relatively consistent across the board. So you have all these systems, right? The budget cycle, the market data, the internal rules. What's actually left? What's the one variable in this whole equation that you have some control over? Well, it all comes down to your ability to make a case for yourself, your power to negotiate. That is the final and often the most critical input into this whole formula. And this all points to a fundamental truth that, unfortunately, most of us learn the hard way. Companies reward negotiators, not silent performers. Just let that sink in for a second. The system is not built to proactively find and reward great work. It's built to respond to a clear, well-supported business case that is presented by you. Now, I know when you hear all this, it can feel a bit cold, maybe even cynical, but I'm going to ask you to try and see it from a different angle. The real key here is to reframe the entire situation. This is not a personal judgment on your worth. It's simply business. From your side of the table, it feels deeply personal. Of course it does. You pour yourself into your work. But from the company's perspective, it's a business transaction. They're managing a budget, probably with hundreds or thousands of employees. Your salary is a line item, an expense that has to be managed according to all those rules and constraints we just talked about. Grasping this distinction, that it's not about your value, but about their process, that is the single most powerful mindset shift you can possibly make. Because once you truly accept that this is a system, that it's a game with a set of unspoken rules, the question changes. It's no longer, why don't they value me? the question becomes something else entirely, something much more powerful. So, how will you prepare? You know that feeling, don't you? You're sitting at your desk. You've just wrapped up a really tough project, maybe solved a problem that nobody else could touch. And you know, deep down, that you are delivering real value. But there's this gap, this disconnect between what you know you're worth and what your paycheck says. And a kind of silence starts to grow around that whole topic. Hesitation. Have you ever really stopped to ask yourself, where does that hesitation actually come from? Well, it comes from a place of deep uncertainty. Because I think most people, on some level, they know they're about to walk into one of the most important conversations of their professional life, and they're just not ready. They go in with emotion. They treat it like a personal request. And right there, that's exactly why the conversation so often fails before it's even really started. Look, I've sat on both sides of this desk for more than 25 years. I've heard the nervous, fumbled requests, and I've seen the calm, confident, evidence-based cases. And if there's one single truth I've learned, it's this. The outcome of that meeting is almost always decided long before you ever walk in the room. It all comes down to one simple, powerful principle. Preparation is power. Now, when I say preparation, I don't mean cramming the night before like it's some kind of test. No, this is about something deeper. It's about architecting your position piece by piece. It's about building a framework that moves you away from an emotional plea based on what you feel you deserve and toward a strategic business case based on what you can prove you're worth. The best way to think about it is like building a house. You need a solid foundation. You need strong pillars to hold everything up. For this conversation, your argument rests on 5 of these pillars. First, you have to do your research. You absolutely must know the market rate for your job with your level of experience in your city. That grounds everything in reality. Second, you document. And I mean you go back 6, 12 months, and you write down every single significant accomplishment. And listen, I'm not talking about your job duties. I'm talking about your achievements. Third, and this is the big one, you quantify. You have to translate those achievements into the language the business speaks, numbers. Fourth, you identify your leverage, what makes your work uniquely valuable right here, right now. And fifth, you time it. You have to pick your moments strategically. And out of all those pillars, there are 2 that really form the core of your argument. They're what separate a weak ask from a powerful case. That's documenting your achievements and, most importantly, quantifying your impact. This is where you build your proof. So what does quantifying actually look like? Well, it means you stop saying things like, I helped improve a process. Instead, you state a fact. You say, the workflow I redesigned last quarter cut our operational overhead, and that resulted in a direct cost savings of $150,000. You see the difference? It's not a feeling, it's a fact. Here's another one. It's not, I supported the sales team. It's the competitive analysis I created was used to shape our new sales strategy, which directly contributed to a 12% lift in quarterly bookings. You're drawing a straight line from your action to a business result. And it works for efficiency, too. Don't just say, I automated a report. Instead, try, the script I wrote has eliminated 50 hours of manual data entry for our team every single month. You have to remember, time is one of the company's most valuable resources, and you've just shown exactly how you've saved it. When you do this work, something fundamental shifts. The entire dynamic changes. You're no longer standing over here in the ask column, just hoping for the best. You are standing firmly in the case column, presenting a factual summary of your value. It stops being a question and it becomes a statement. Okay, so you've built this powerful data-driven case. Now it needs the right stage. You don't bring this up in a hallway conversation on a chaotic Monday morning. You have to be strategic. You align this conversation with the successful completion of a big project. You schedule it as part of your formal performance review. You choose a moment when the business is already thinking about performance, investment, and value. You know, this level of deep preparation does something to you on the inside. The nervousness, it doesn't just disappear, but it gets smaller, and it gets replaced by this quiet confidence. The whole conversation transforms. You're no longer an employee making a plea. You're a strategic partner, there to discuss the return on investment the company is getting from you. And that is the shift from plea to poise. So you've done the work. You have your market data. You have your documented achievements. You have your quantified impact. Your case is now built on a foundation of solid fact. You're ready. And this, right here, is the point where the real conversation can finally begin. Because, let's be honest, all the data, all the facts in the world, they're just numbers on a page without the right delivery. Your preparation has gotten you to the door. It's opened it for you. But now, you have to be the one to walk through it and actually articulate your case. So now let's talk about what to say. You know, in any career, there are maybe a handful of conversations that truly define your path. Moments that can really change your compensation, your trajectory, even how you see your own professional worth. And one of the most important, and frankly, one of the most poorly handled, is the one where you have to ask for more. So let's talk about how to get that right. I've seen this play out more times than I can count. You've done the work, you've run the numbers in your head, maybe you've even practiced in front of the mirror, the meeting's on the calendar. But as it gets closer, you feel that little knot forming in your stomach, don't you? It's the anxiety of the ask. You believe you deserve it, but you're not quite sure how to make them believe it too. So you walk into that meeting, and what's your main tool? It's hope. You're hoping they noticed all that late night work. You're hoping they'll think about your loyalty, your personal situation. You're essentially appealing to their sense of fairness, their goodwill. And that right there, that's almost always the first mistake. And that hope, it leads you to use all the wrong words. You might bring up what a friend makes at another company, or talk about your rising cost of living. You're making an appeal based on need or what feels fair to you. And while those things are very, very real, in a business discussion, they're simply irrelevant. You're speaking one language, and your manager is required to operate in a completely different one. Then comes the answer you probably could have predicted. It's either a polite no, or even more common, that vague, let me see what I can do, which, as we know, is often the corporate version of a very slow death. The meeting ends, and you're left feeling, well, frustrated, undervalued, and it can really start a downward spiral. The thing is, it was all completely avoidable. All right, let's completely reframe this. The reason that whole scenario fails is because it's built on a false premise. You're not there to make a personal appeal. This is a business discussion. It's a discussion about the market value of a critical asset to the company, and that asset is you. Just let that sit for a moment. This is a business discussion, not a request for mercy. When you really truly internalize that idea, the entire dynamic shifts. You're no longer asking for a favor. You are now discussing the terms of a professional engagement based on the value you create and the realities of the market. It's not personal at all. It's just economics. So if we agree that it's a business discussion, then you have to use business language. This is where that mindset shift becomes practical. The words you choose will signal right from the start whether this is an emotional plea or a serious professional case. Just look at the difference here. The column on the left, I need, my friend, it's all about your personal circumstances. It puts your manager in the position of being a benefactor. But the column on the right, that's about the business. Based on market data, that's objective reality. My contributions, that links your work directly to the company's success. You have to speak the language of value. But, you know, having the right words is only half of it. I've seen people walk in with a perfectly good business case and completely undermine it with their delivery. Your demeanor, how you carry yourself, has to match the message. It has to show that this is a serious conversation between two professionals. This is the posture you're aiming for. First, calm. You're calm because this is a logical discussion, not an emotional confrontation. Second, confident. You're confident because you've done your homework, you know the data, and you believe in the value you bring. And finally, professional, because this is a negotiation between two business partners about fair market value. This demeanor reinforces every single point in your business case. And that brings us to what I think is the most important point of all. The language, the demeanor we're talking about, this isn't a script you just memorize. It's not an act. It's the natural result of a real internal shift in how you see yourself. Once you start operating as a business of one, these behaviors just become authentic. So when you boil it all down, what's the one idea you really need to hold on to? The one thing that separates a successful negotiation from another frustrating conversation? It's this. You are not asking for more money. You are clarifying your value proposition. You are presenting a calm, well-researched case for why the value you deliver to this business commands a specific price in the professional market. The moment you truly understand that, you stop asking for a raise, and you start conducting business. Let's talk about a moment I think we've all felt. That quiet walk to your manager's office. The door closes, and you know you're about to have that conversation. The one about your compensation.
You've probably run it through your mind 100 times. But there's this enormous gap, isn't there, between knowing you're worth more and actually finding the right words to ask for it?
We call it the art of asking, but if we're being honest, for most people, it feels a lot less like art and a lot more like a panicked internal monologue. The story you tell yourself right before you walk into that room, well, it often dooms the conversation before it even begins. It's almost always the wrong story. You know, I've sat on the other side of that desk for years, and I've seen that flawed rehearsal play out so many times. It sounds a little something like this in your head. Okay, my rent just went up, I need this, or I found out what so-and-so makes and that's not fair. We default to building a case on our personal needs. It's a very human thing to do. It's also a fundamental error in a business.
If any of that sounds familiar, you're not alone. It's the approach almost everyone takes instinctively. But in the world of business, it's a critical mistake. See, the very moment you make this conversation about what you need, you framed it all wrong. You've accidentally positioned yourself as a problem your manager has to solve rather than a valuable asset they need to retain. So what I want to do is help you throw that old script out. For the next few minutes, we're going to completely reframe this. We're going to talk about the mindset you need, the exact language to use, and the kind of professional presence that turns an anxious plea into a productive, strategic discussion.
Okay, the first and most important shift has to happen inside your own head. This meeting, it is not a personal plea. You're not asking for a favor. You are there to have a business discussion about the market value of your contributions. I want you to start thinking of it like you're simply delivering a report on value.
Just look at the difference here. On the left, the emotional plea, it's all about you, your needs, your feelings. It's subjective. But on the right, the business discussion is about the company, the value you bring to the business. It's objective, and it's driven by data. One approach makes you feel like a subordinate asking for a handout. The other positions you as a strategic partner talking about an investment.
Let this idea really settle in. You are not walking into that office to ask for mercy. You are there to discuss business. When you truly believe that, the whole dynamic in the room, it shifts. And it shifts in your favor. All right. Once you have the mindset right, you need the right words. We have to replace those vague emotional justifications with something concrete. We're going to talk about 3 strategic levers that help you build a logical, compelling business case that's, well, pretty hard to argue with. Here it is. This is the single most important pivot you can make in your language. You have to stop talking about what you need and start talking about what your value is. Every single point you make has to tie back to your value to the market, your value to the company, and your value to its future. Let me show you exactly how. These are the 3 pillars of your discussion. First, market data. Second, your specific contributions. And third, your commitment to long-term growth. When you use these together, they create a professional, data-driven argument that commands respect. Let's break each one down. You start with this phrase, based on my research of market data. You see how that immediately elevates the tone? It's not about your feelings anymore. It's not about what you think you're worth. It's about what the objective market says a role like yours, with your skills, is worth. You're just the messenger, reporting the facts. Now this is where you provide the evidence. You follow up the market data with a clear summary of your impact. Something like, in my contributions this year, specifically leading the X project, which resulted in a Y% increase in efficiency, show that I'm delivering at that level. You have to connect your work to business result. You're simply reminding them of the great return they're getting on their investment in you. And finally, you tie it all together with a forward-looking statement. I want to continue to grow long-term with this company, and I see my role evolving to, now this is crucial, this is not a threat to leave. It's the opposite. It's a statement of commitment. You're telling your manager that investing more in you is actually an investment in the company's own future. Now, you could have the most perfect script, the most well-researched data in the world, and still fail if your delivery sabotages the message. If your words say business discussion, but your body language is screaming personal plea, I guarantee you, you're going to lose. How you carry yourself into that room is your signature. You need to be calm, not anxious. Confident, not arrogant. Professional. Your posture, your tone of voice, your eye contact, everything about you needs to communicate that you are a peer having a serious business discussion. You are not a nervous employee asking for a raise. You are a partner at the table. Now, let's just zoom out for a second. This whole framework, it's not just a tactic for one stressful meeting. It's really a philosophy for managing your entire career. It's about consistently and professionally communicating your value over the long haul. You see, your reputation as a results-oriented professional isn't built in that one meeting. It's built every single day, in project updates, in team meetings, even in casual hallway conversations. This big negotiation, it's really just the final step, the culmination of all the small ways you've been demonstrating your value all along. And think about that phrase again. I want to grow long-term with this company. That shouldn't just be a line you use in a negotiation. It should be a principle that guides your work. Are you taking on the projects that matter for the company's future? Are you developing the skills that make you a more valuable long-term asset? That's what this is all about. Because in the end, asking for what you're worth isn't really a conversation about the past. It's not about justifying the work you've already done. It's a forward-looking statement about the value you intend to create. So the real question isn't what you deserve to be paid today. The question you should be asking yourself is this: what is the value you're preparing to deliver tomorrow?
You know the scene. You're sitting across from your manager, and the performance review has gone really well. They're singing your praises, listing all your wins, using words like invaluable and exceeded expectations. And you feel that warmth, that sense of recognition. But then, the conversation shifts to your compensation. A number is put on the table. And yes, it's an increase, technically, but as you look at it, a quiet kind of chill just settles over the room.
And in that silent moment, your mind starts doing the math. You're thinking about the late nights, the projects you single-handedly saved from the brink, the sheer effort you've put in for the last 12 months. You see your contribution, and then you see that number, and they just don't add up. And this one heavy question just forms in your mind. After all of that, is this it? It's a deeply isolating feeling, and it happens in offices every single day.
And that feeling, well, it leads to the real question we have to talk about. You know you should speak up. You know you should advocate for yourself. But just the thought of it is uncomfortable. Why is it that a conversation that should be about business value feels so incredibly personal? Why does it feel less like a negotiation and more like you're asking for a handout?
Well, here's the truth. If you want a different outcome, you have to completely change the frame of the conversation. This isn't about whether you're worthy. It's about your professional value in a competitive marketplace. So the most powerful shift you can make mentally is to stop seeing yourself as an employee asking for more and start seeing yourself as a professional selling a valuable service.
Let's be really clear about this difference, because it's everything. The employee mindset, it asks, can I please have more? Right? It's a request that positions you as a subordinate asking for generosity. The professional mindset, on the other hand, it states, the market rate for the value I deliver is X, and here's the documented proof of that value. See the difference? One is a plea, the other is a business case. One is based on hope, the other is based on commerce. The entire power dynamic shifts.
I want you to let this idea really sink in. Your expertise, your ability to solve difficult problems, your track record of getting things done, that is your product. The company you work for, they're your client. It's a commercial relationship. The moment you strip the emotion away and see it for the transaction it truly is, you start to reclaim your power in these critical conversations.
Now that mindset is the foundation. It's absolutely essential. But a strong financial future isn't built on one good conversation. No, it's the result of a very deliberate long-term strategy. It requires careful planning. So let's look at the actual blueprint for how you systematically build your career's financial health over time.
This strategy really rests on 3 core pillars. First, negotiate every single entry point. A new job, a promotion, a major change in your role. Every one of these moments sets a new baseline for everything that comes after. Second, you have to track your market value every year. Think about it. You wouldn't sell a house without checking what similar homes are selling for. Your career is your biggest asset. You have to treat it with that same diligence. And third, intentionally build a rare stack of skills. At the end of the day, your compensation is a function of how hard you are to replace. So combine skills in unique ways that make you indispensable.
And the execution of this whole strategy? It comes down to one simple principle. You operate with data, not drama. The feeling that you're underpaid is very real, I get it, but feelings are not a negotiating tool. Market salary data, a list of your achievements with numbers attached, proof of the revenue you brought in or the costs you saved, that is the only language that cuts through the noise. You have to bring a ledger, not a grievance.
So let me close by framing this in a way you may not have thought it before. Negotiating your value isn't just a good idea.
It's not something you do only when you're feeling particularly brave. It's actually a core professional responsibility. In a way, it's part of your job.
You have to understand this. Your salary is not a reflection of your loyalty. It's not a measure of how many hours you work. It is, quite simply, a lagging indicator of how well you have articulated and negotiated for your value up to this point in your career. And here's the critical part. Negotiation is a skill. And just like any other skill, it can be learned, it can be practiced, and it can be improved over time.
This work doesn't start the week before your next performance review. It starts right now, today. I mean it. Open a document and just start logging your accomplishments with concrete metrics. Spend 30 minutes tonight researching the actual market rate for your job title in your city. The next conversation you have about your compensation will be completely different because you will be coming from a place of strength, a place of data.
This is the effective professional, where careers are built with intention and strategy, not by accident or luck.